All right. Yali Madad and a very good evening, everyone. My name is Salman Kimani and I am the member of Aga Khan Education Board for Pakistan. We are extremely delighted to offer a series of webinar on study abroad for educational opportunities in Canada. This series is being offered in collaboration with the Aga Khan Education Board for Canada. Some of you will remember we had offered a similar series of webinars in collaboration with the Aga Khan Education Board for Australia in the summer this year. And this is again part of the similar series that we are offering with Aga Khan Education Board for Canada. This program is specially designed for many of the students in Pakistan who are aspiring to explore opportunities for education, higher education, especially in Canada at the undergraduate and as well as the graduate and postgraduate levels. This is going to be a three-part webinar series, and I'm extremely delighted to offer this first webinar with some very eminent speakers from our team in Canada, and I'm very, very grateful to both Khadija and Anis for joining us today. Before we start the session, I just want to give you a quick introduction about the session today. So this session will have two parts. The first part will be covered by Khadija on the undergraduate studies landscape in Canada, and she will share about what the education system in Canada is like, and what are different opportunities for undergraduate studies in Canada, which is offered, and all the essential information that the students need to know. Part two will be covered by Anis, who will share information about various funding opportunities that are available for students, especially the international students for higher education in Canada. The two parts will take about 45 minutes, and we will leave last 15 minutes for any questions that you may have. Those who have joined us on the YouTube channel, you are requested to please leave your questions in the comment box during the session, and we'll pick your questions from there and ask our panelists towards the end of the session. Please keep in mind that the first session is focused on the undergraduate studies. So please ask questions on the undergraduate studies only. Next Saturday, next weekend, we will cover a dedicated session on the graduate and the postgraduate opportunities in Canada. So let us begin this session with the introduction of our very, very first speaker. Our first speaker for the day is Khadija Chetha. Khadija has worked in international student recruitment for more than 12 years at the University of Alberta with a focus on the Middle East and Africa. She is very passionate about Canadian education and has met extensively with students and parents around the world, advising them on the study abroad options and also speaking as a keynote on various international education fairs. Khadija is a very proud alumni of University of Alberta with a bachelor's in international politics and linguistics. She was an English teacher in Japan for 2 years and has also completed an archaeology of field school in Ecuador. She's fluent in multiple languages. She enjoys travel, Latin dance, ball hockey, and singing. On the voluntary front, Khadija is serving her third term as the member of Aga Khan Education Board for Edmonton, Alberta, and she was previously a member of the Smiley Volunteer Corps, a religious education teacher, and also a program coach in the Diamond Jubilee Local Bazaar program. So Khadija, thank you very much for joining us today, and I'll hand it over to you for the first part of the session.
Thank you very much, Salman, and Yali Madad to all of you joining us from Pakistan. Thank you for the warm introduction. I'm going to go through the first part of the session, just a little bit of an overview of the presentation today. We are going to talk about understanding the Canadian tertiary education system. I'm going to speak about some skills and some tactics on how to choose the right university course for you. Admission requirements, general admission requirements to Canadian universities, and the application process. My colleague and friend Anis Umedali will then cover the second portion on funding, and then we'll give you some opportunity to ask some questions. Again, this session is focused on undergraduate recruitment, so we will be focusing the question and answer on that. And again, please stay tuned for next week where I'll be joining you again for a postgraduate session. So let's get started. Some key facts about Canada. We are the second largest country in the world, but we only have 37.5 million people. So large country geographically, but a lot of wide open spaces because we definitely do not have as much population as would be expected from such a vast country. There are 6 time zones across the country. I'm joining you as well as Anis from Edmonton, Alberta, which is in the mountain time zone. So it's early morning for us. We do also have 4 distinct seasons in Canada, which does mean that it does snow in the winter. We just had our first snowfall this week over here. Do not despair or be discouraged by the snow. It is definitely doable. It is definitely handleable, as Anis will tell you, since he's from Pakistan originally as well. 10 provinces in Canada, 3 territories. The majority of the population does live quite close to the US border, which is the longest undefended border in the world. We do have 3 coastlines, and over 640,000 international students were welcomed to Canada at the undergraduate and postgraduate level, Pakistan being a top source country. And this is, over 150% increase in the last decade, which shows how Canada is orienting itself to be an attractive destination for international students. 96% of students would recommend Canada as a top study destination, and the federal government has actually invested about $148 million to broaden international enrollment. So your introductory Canada 101 slide. Canada is an officially bilingual country. English and French are the official languages. French is normally spoken mostly in the province of Quebec and in some parts of New Brunswick. English is the majority language in other provinces, but over 200 mother languages are spoken. So this speaks to the multiculturalism, the diversity of the Canadian population. About 1/5 of the country was born outside. So again, we are welcoming for immigrants and quite a respectful country for religious and ethnic diversity. The official sports are ice hockey and lacrosse. Of course, if you know nothing about these sports, you will definitely become quite well equipped once you find yourself in a Canadian city. We're not talking field hockey or cricket, but there are definitely pockets of enjoyment of those sports as well. And a little bit of a cross section of some few famous Canadians that you might recognize. My favorite from this list is Jim Carrey. I think he is hilarious. And of course, our Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau. So as you can see, this is a little bit of a snapshot across the country. No matter where you choose to study in Canada, whether it's a large city, whether it's a mid-sized city, whether you are close to the mountains, close to the ocean, close to Niagara Falls, no matter what type of education environment you're looking for, no matter where you study in Canada, you will be choosing excellence, you will be finding natural landscapes, friendly, welcoming people, and all of the amenities that you would wish to have. So Canada's post-secondary system is about 96 universities and over 125 colleges. So most of those institutions, about 90% are publicly funded. Again, this means that most institutions will receive funding from the federal government and need to maintain a certain level of quality of teaching, research, so to maintain their funding. So again, no matter where you're choosing, again, this is the difference between public and private institutions. Since most institutions are public, you know that wherever you choose to study, you are going to be receiving a high quality education. Again, there are 10 different systems in 10 provinces. So each province has a provincial ministry of advanced education. So again, it is a little bit different. So this is why you need to do your research for the different universities in the different provinces. It is a bit of a combination of the US and the UK system. Typically, a university degree is 4 years. A bachelor degree is usually about 120 credits. You take about 5 courses per term. Similar to a degree or a diploma from a college, colleges will normally be anywhere from 1 to 2 years to 4 years, with your credential being either a diploma, a certificate, an associate degree, or a full degree. And then polytechnic institutions are again focused on the trades, for example, instrumentation, welding, pipe fitting, or different types of vocational training, hospitality, culinary arts. And these would lead more towards a journeyman certificate or apprenticeship. We do offer foundation year programs or pathway programs. For example, if you are looking for a little bit of a more supported entry into a full degree program or an ESL, English language program. Normally, full-time programs are offered in the fall term and the winter term. So fall term usually is from September to December. Winter term usually from January to April. Spring and summer terms usually are limited and condensed. And most universities and colleges will offer a fall intake. Some will offer a winter intake as well. Normally for graduate programs, the difference is between course-based and thesis-based, but at the undergraduate level, you would be looking at a 4-year course-based bachelor's degree. Some specialization or honors levels degrees may ask you to do a thesis or a capstone research project. But the most important thing to look at the undergraduate level are designated learning institutions. So again, private for-college profits are often low quality and may not offer the same level of rigorous education that you're looking for. So make sure that you are looking at a designated learning institution. So Canada's post-secondary system offers many different options. You can look for whatever type of institution would be the best fit for you. What types of factors do we look at? We're looking at student body size. So some undergraduate focused universities, comprehensive universities may have small student bodies, maybe a little bit more cohort based. Some of the larger institutions like the University of Toronto, University of British Columbia, McGill will have up to 75,000 students. Tuition can also vary. It can be anywhere from 12,000 up to 60,000 Canadian dollars, plus your fees and your living expenses. So these are some of the factors to look at. We in Canada are also a world leader in work integrated learning and cooperative education. So any type of experiential education, internships, or work integrated learning opportunities, this is definitely the place to be. We also offer a 3-year postgraduate work permit, which entitles you to legally work for up to 3 years after you've graduated from your degree or certificate program. And during that time, you can apply for permanent residence. But that 3-year postgraduate work program really gives you an opportunity to obtain some relevant professional experience in your field. Canada is also very flexible. So unlike the UK, if you choose a major, you have to stick in that major. There's quite a bit of flexibility in terms of choosing your major, your minor, choosing certificate programs, switching majors or switching degree programs. There's also an interdisciplinary component. So you complete courses, for example, in your major area of study, but you would have the opportunity to take electives or options. For example, I studied in political science, but took many courses in psychology and in history because these were areas of interest, and I was able to expand my knowledge in those areas as well. Study abroad options are also available. So if you wanted to come to Canada as an international student from Pakistan and then do a 4-month exchange in Australia or Germany or France or Mexico, a lot of those opportunities are available as well. And for the most part, there are no quotas. So in Canada, admissions are quantitative, which means they're based mostly on your academic results. A word about professional programs such as architecture, pharmacy, dentistry, law. Most of those are not direct entry in Canada. which means you would need to do a minimum of 1 to 2 years in a bachelor degree program and then apply to these professional degree programs. Medicine as well is generally not open to Canadian students. There are about 16 medical schools in Canada. Only 6 will admit international students. So, and again, it's not a direct entry program, so that's something to think about. Nursing, however, you would be able to enter directly into a program, but it is quite competitive. So a little bit of information about designated learning institutions. What is a DLI? These are schools that can actually enroll international students that are approved by the government. So if you require a Canadian study permit, your acceptance letter from the institution must be from a designated learning institution. And you can check this on our Center for Qualifications. Make sure that you are looking for an accredited institutions. We have found that many members of the Jamaat who have an intention to study in Canada can often be misled by institutions that are not accredited or not designated. Sometimes this is by agents or private recruiters or immigration consultants that may be profit-driven or profit-based and may not have your best interests in mind. So please be careful when you are talking to third-party agents. Normally, international students will have access to a recruitment officer. For example, just like the role that I play at the University of Alberta, they are the best person to be able to speak to directly to the institution to learn about what your pathways would be. Again, the government of Canada has put these processes in place to make sure that institutions are meeting a quality standard. And again, this is why when you're selecting your institution, make sure that it is a designated learning institution in Canada. So what are some of the ways you can decide what type of post-secondary institution is best for you? We want you to look at the type of institution. Is it a university? Is it a college? Is it a polytechnic or training institution? What type of courses are offered? Are you looking for a large city, a medium city, or maybe a more sort of college-focused town? What type of presence or size of the Ismaili Jamaat is there in that town or city? Many universities in Canada will have an Ismaili Student Association as well as an on-campus Jamaat Khana. So even if you're not in a large or major city with a significant Ismaili Jamaat, there are often Ismaili post-secondary campus Jamaat Khanas as well as connections to the greater community in smaller cities. Again, looking at living on campus or off campus, what might be more affordable for you? What type of residences are available? What are the affordability of institutions? For example, if you have a dream to study a Bachelor of Commerce at, the Richard Ivey School at Western University, what type of scholarships would they offer? What type of affordability or budget can you have? And Anis will talk a little bit more about that. What are the employability and earning potentials of the career or fields that you're choosing? And again, we want students to ask themselves, how will this degree or diploma increase my quality of life, my family's quality of life? These are some of the areas where we have received guidance from the Imam about how we can use our education to also give back and contribute. Look at non-academic features as well, sports, clubs. Are you interested in pursuing certain non-academic passions, like the fine arts, like music, like dance, like any type of volunteer service? What type of work experience opportunities are? And a really good way to start again is to talk to your high school counselor. Most high schools will have a counselor, a college counselor. Look for handbooks and brochures. Look for education fairs in your hometown. Social media is a great way to connect, virtual campus tours. And again, education consultants should be accredited with good references if you are engaging a third-party recruitment partner. So in Canada, admission requirements will vary, but you should be looking at 4 key factors: your academic performance, your required subjects. So for example, if you're applying to a business program, you should have math. If you're applying to an engineering program, you should have chemistry and physics. If you're applying to a computing science program, maybe you want a background in computing, right? We will look at your English language proficiency and any type of supplementary information that's required. For example, if you're applying to a design course, you may need a portfolio. If you're applying to an architecture course, you may need a personal statement. But for the most part, that's not required. We will look at your grades. Most universities will admit on your academic performance. Recommendation letters and essays are generally not required for admission to a program, but will be required for scholarships. We do accept the Pakistan national boards. These are widely accepted at Canadian institutions. Of course, GPA conversions will be based on every university and every specific program. The International Baccalaureate, the British GCE A-level system are also widely accepted. And you generally do not need to write the SAT for Canadian school admissions. This is mostly for the USA. In Canada, the SAT is generally not required. So the application cycle, again, for those of you who are in grade 9, 10, 11, explore your options early. Start doing your research early. The early bird gets the worm. When you're in your grade 11 year, make a short list of schools that you're interested in or that you want to engage with the following year. And when you're in your grade 12 year, check for school visits at the start of the school year. Check for attending education fairs. Most university applications will open October 1st. So you can apply and then submit your results once you've submitted your application. Scholarship applications usually close by December or by February. So make sure you are applying for those supplementary scholarships early. And normally final offers are released anywhere from the springtime up to the summertime. You will need at least 8 to 12 weeks to apply for your visa and study permit, even though Pakistan does have a direct student entry, direct stream. You want to give yourself time to apply for your visa and study permit and to be able to prepare for your arrival. So start early. Students will normally apply specifically to a major or to a degree program. So you'd be applying to the University of Calgary with a major, in the faculty of business with a major in accounting. These are what you want to look at when you're filling out your application. Normally, you will apply online directly to the institution. In the province of Ontario, there is an Ontario University Application Centre where you can list up to 3 Ontario schools, and the application fee will vary anywhere from 50 to 150 Canadian dollars. Most programs will close anywhere from January to March. Some programs, the deadline is a little bit later. So check the deadline for your specific institution. Make sure you're applying before the deadline. And again, earlier, the better. Normally, if you have documents to submit, you will upload them into your application web form. You will have your counselor send them directly to the university. And your final board results usually can be verified online. Your final results may be required to be sent by courier. Again, every university will have different requirements to submit your documents. Other things to consider: applying for on-campus housing. So there may be a separate application for the on-campus hostel or dormitory. You may also need to look at some non-instructional fees. So on top of your tuition, you may be assessed non-academic fees that cover things like your athletics, your bus and metro pass, your health and dental plan, your supplementary system access fees, as well as your meal plan on campus. So these are things you want to budget for, and make sure you're watching your deadlines. So hopefully this is a little bit of a quick introduction on the Canadian universities. These are some good resources for you. We do have an official study in Canada portal, as well as all of the information listed, which will be shared once the presentation is shared with you guys. So quickly, we're going to move on to the second portion, which is funding your studies. Again, I may have gone a little bit over time, so hopefully we'll have some time for questions, and I will hand it back over to Salman to introduce our next speaker.
Thank you, Khadija. This was a wonderful overview of the undergraduate education in Canada, and we already started receiving a lot of questions, which I would share towards the end of the session. Moving on to part 2 of the webinar today, which would focus on funding opportunities. Of course, obviously, a lot of students have questions about scholarships and funding for their undergraduate education in Canada. We are delighted to have Mr. Anis Umaid Ali with us today. Anis is a fully licensed investment advisor, and he holds a chartered investment manager designation as well as portfolio manager designation. Anis completed his international baccalaureate from a United World College in Hong Kong, where he spent his formative years among students of 60 different nationalities. He has a University of Alberta degree in actuarial sciences and a minor in business, and he began a career in wealth management industry. On the voluntary front, Anis lends his expertise to various boards and charitable foundations. Anis is currently the chairman of the Aga Khan Economic Planning Board for Edmonton, and he has also been a board member of Grants and Review Board in the past. Anis, thank you very much for sharing your time and knowledge today, and I'll hand over to you to take it from here.
Thank you, Salman, and Yali Madad, everyone. Thanks, Khatija, for setting up such a great foundation for us to move forward from here. Obviously, whenever you're looking into education and finding opportunities to study abroad, it's a tremendous undertaking, especially when we are coming from out east. So just to let you know, I came to Canada more than 21 years ago as a student, and from Karachi, and ended up making Canada as my home. So there are a lot of considerations that goes into when you're thinking about how to fund your education, and it could be a bit of a daunting task. The key piece, and something that Khatija very much alluded to as well, is to plan. Is to plan early and prepare as much as you can, so that you are not going to get into trouble in terms of financing your education in Canada, and there are less surprises, your blind spots are covered, and you have a very good idea of what your pathway looks like. Because financial stress could be very, very challenging, and it could actually impact your education as well when you are in a country abroad. So you just want to make sure that you're prepared, you're planned, you have talked and communicated with your family and stuff in terms of what the cost is going to be like, and all the stakeholders that are involved are clear in terms of what those pathway over the 4 years or 2 years or 6 years of your education in a country abroad is going to look like. Canada is a vast country, and the cost of education in Canada varies from city to city, from provinces to provinces, from universities to universities, from colleges to colleges, and in a very broad sense, we can say that a typical undergraduate study in Canada costs anywhere between $12,000 to up to about $35,000 just alone in school fee. So it varies from, depending on whether you're East Coast, whether you're on West Coast. The average tuition cost would be somewhere around $20,000. So that's the kind of target that you probably want to work with, but that's just alone the cost of the tuition. Canada has some of the most expensive cities in the world. When you look at Vancouver, when you look at Toronto, they are all in top 10 most expensive cities in the world. So it is a little bit expensive to live in Canada. And just the cost of education is not alone. You have books, you have supplies. A typical cost of books and supplies could range anywhere between $1,600 to, in some cases, more than $5,000. And you can see the range right over here as well. It depends on the program that you're going to take. It also depends on the school that you're going to and what the costs are, whether those costs are subsidized or not. And so you want to budget for not only your tuition, but for your books, for your supplies, and as well as for your living expenses. So what's a typical living expense cost in Canada could be? It very much depends whether you are going to live on residence or whether you're going to live off campus. And it depends on your preferences, it depends on your taste, it depends on how you want to enjoy your life. If you're a bit of a mature student, you may decide to live off campus. If you're coming with family, that might be a bit of a better option for you. But if you're a brand new student who doesn't know much about the country, hasn't really have had experience living on their own, you may probably choose to live in residence because there are meal plans involved, there's a student body involved, there are a lot of students who are in the same kind of boat as you are, and you probably want to be part of that kind of community. Now, that cost alone can range anywhere between $11,000 to about $18,000 to $20,000. So just if you just tag that cost on top of your tuition fee, now you're looking at a cost of close to about $40,000 typically in Canada for an undergrad school, for an undergrad degree of 4 years. So let's look at an example over here. We're just hypothetically calling the student as Samir. And Samir is taking a Bachelor of Education degree from 3 different schools across Canada. There's McGill University in Montreal, there's Mount Royal University in Calgary, and there's Vancouver Island University in Nanaimo in BC, in British Columbia. And if you look at it, the tuition varies across the 3 universities. The cost of living also varies across the universities. And the range and the total cost of the education varies somewhere between $37,000 to a little bit over $40,000. What you need to probably pay a lot more attention to is, in some cases, like for example, in BC, the cost of education and the cost of living is almost the same, while the variance is a little bit different in other cities. So pay attention not only to the tuition costs, but to what your living expenses are going to be, what your book and supplies are going to be. And at the same time, you're also estimating for other expenses. For example, like you do want to make sure that you have budgeted for emergencies and stuff like that, and put it all together to have a bit of an idea in terms of what your total university education cost is going to be, and then you budget it that way. So just in the previous slide that you could see, we just did a one-year run of the relationship between Canadian dollar and Pakistani rupee, and you can see that Canadian dollar has been ascending gradually and consistently against the Pakistani rupees, which means that when you are thinking of the cost, you're not only budgeting for tuition, living expenses, book and supplies, emergencies, but you're also budgeting for exchange rate changes and very likely increases. And in some cases, what we have seen is that over a 4-year time period of university, the exchange rate differential is somewhere between 10 to 15%, which is significant. So if you're expecting that your cost is going to go up somewhere between 10 to 15% over a 4-year time period, you're budgeting on an annualized basis close to about 4% of that increase across your graduate program. So you have to factor that in so that you can work on those and you budget and plan for those. Coming back to the funding opportunities, how do I fund my school? How do I make sure that my living expenses, my tuition cost, other costs and stuff will be covered when I come to Canada? And there's not one single answer for that. The key piece is that you're coming, you're looking at all your resources that are available to you, you're putting them together and you're trying to maximize them. The first thing and the foremost thing that you got to do, Khadija, we can go back to that slide again. The first and the foremost thing you need to do is to do your research. All major universities across Canada have some sort of scholarship or bursary programs that you might be eligible for. So you have to basically do your research in terms of, first of all, what kind of scholarships that you would qualify for. Some scholarships are academic based, some scholarships are activity based. Then there are some financial aids that are available on need based, bursaries that are available and stuff. You also want to look into loans. You also want to look into parental support, right? You also want to look into what kind of other institutional support that are available, either through, let's say, Aga Khan Education Board or some other local foundations. Like, for example, when I was in Karachi, there was a Infaq Foundation that gave me some scholarship when I was coming to Canada. And we basically found it accidentally, but there are institutions that are available, but you have to do your research. And we will be sharing this particular slide to share some of the resources where you can find actually some of these scholarships and stuff, but also be a little bit more creative. There are universities where scholarships are available only for Pakistani students, right? Or for South Asian students and stuff. So be a little bit creative and try to basically go and dig into those information and try to find out how can I maximize all the resources and then pool them together to build a financial plan for your study in Canada. I also wanted to speak a little bit about the work integrated learning and cooperative education, something that Khatija already spoke to. The key part over here is that you have an opportunity here where you're working with a model where your academic education as well as your work learning experience can happen together, right? So in most cases, some universities do offer that international students actually participate in these work integrated learning and co-op programs. You have to have the right kind of student permits that allow you to participate in these programs. What they are is that you alternate semesters where you're going to school and you're taking another semester to go to the co-op programs where you are involved in development of, employability, personal agency, and lifelong learning through work experience. And Canada is a leader in work integrated learning and a great choice for students. In most universities and stuff, these co-op programs will be available. So you will be able to not only participate in these work co-op programs, but your spouse may also have an opportunity to acquire a work permit and work in Canada legally while you are undertaking your education. And that's a great way for you to come to Canada, settle, and support your education. The work experience that you acquire through this program also helps you to get your graduation work permit. It also helps you to get a Canadian work experience. And that is something which is very, very important for your employability after your graduation. Because most Canadian employers will ask for a Canadian work experience. And if you don't have a Canadian work experience, your employability decreases. So this is a great way for you to acquire a Canadian work experience while you're in school, pay for your education a little bit, be able to support the family, and at the same time, it's a great way for you to build a pathway for you to have a permanent residency in Canada if you choose to. So how are students supported with work integrated learning? And there are a lot of support available in schools and stuff. So there are career service centers, in-faculty advising, employment centers and stuff, which are pretty much available at all the universities and colleges in Canada. So you can reach out to them directly to find out about these kind of programs. There are a lot of support that is available through institutions in terms of resume building, in terms of interview preparation, in terms of the kind of services and reaching out to potential employers and stuff. There are work fairs, there are job fairs and stuff like that. So there's tremendous amount of resources that are available at universities themselves. And it's very, very important that you reach out. You reach out to these universities directly. You do your research. You connect with people like Khatija across universities to plan, what your pathway to education in Canada would look like. Whether it's going to be a combination of pure academics, or whether it's going to be a co-op type of program with work integrated learning, you have to make that decision for yourself. But at the end of the day, there are a tremendous amount of resources that are available at different universities that you can reach out to, and you can plan these things. So internship and co-op opportunities and job opportunities. There are a lot of resources that are developed both at the federal level and at provincial level in Canada. And both the federal government and the provincial governments have done really good job to bring these resources to the public. And obviously international students also have access to these resources as being part of the public in Canada. There are job banks that are directly available from Government of Canada website. They've also actually put in tremendous amount of resources so you can actually research in terms of what are the careers that are in demand right now. What are their employability chances? How do you build your resume? Who do you reach out to for different kind of resources and stuff? And then there, as I mentioned before, that there are career centers and resources that are available at your school. So you got to make sure that you reach out to them. A lot of schools actually consistently and very regularly hold job fairs, and that are hosted on campus. And nowadays things are happening virtually, so you can attend these job fairs virtually as well, where employers and recruiters will come to you to recruit you. Another really, really good website that I would allude to would be AKEBP Canada's website, which is our institutional website. There are so many good resources, and coming from an EPB background, Economic and Planning Board background, I would highly recommend that you actually go and check out the Economic Planning Board's website on AKEBP Canada site as well. And you will see that there are so many good tools that are available to financial plan, to budget, to save, right? And you can use these resources to help you go through your education. Then there are provincial resources as well, where there are provincial job banks. So, and at the same time, you will have direct recruiting opportunity through, let's say, government institutions like, let's say, health services and stuff like that, and they will recruit directly on their own websites as well. So the idea again is that you make sure that you are doing your research, you are going to many different resources, you are casting a really, really wide net to explore your opportunities. You have to also make sure that you're preparing for budget, you're budgeting. Budgeting is very, very important. And we have kind of basically created a bit of a budget slide in here, but the key thing is to make sure your budget is realistic. You have left room for variances and emergencies in terms of your cost of cost of tuition. In some cases, cost of tuition has risen mid-year, not at the end of the year that you are typically planning for, but mid-year. How do you plan for some of those kind of variances and stuff? And you also want to make sure your budget is with realistic expectations, so that when you come to Canada, you're not running out of funding mid-year. You have funding available throughout the whole year, and obviously till the end of your program and stuff, to make sure you're budgeting for that. And there are many resources on that side available too. I think this is one of the most important pieces. What are some of the tips for parents and students? Do your homework. Assess your finances locally first to establish which schools and programs that fit within your family budget and stuff. In some cases, especially on undergraduate level, the level playing field is actually quite consistent across Canada. It's at the graduate level that it starts to basically become a little bit more competitive, a little bit more specific. So you don't necessarily need to always go to University of Toronto or University of British Columbia or McGill University or University of Alberta. You can choose some smaller, still designated learning institution, but you can choose them that basically fit your family's budget and stuff. Plan and prepare early. I think we've been talking about that quite a bit. Track your spending, from textbooks and stuff. to take out foods and stuff like that, because it all adds up. Budget for emergencies, understand what the cost is going to be, whether you're going to live on campus or off campus. Use international student guidebook that has been circulated. Use international student centers. There are tremendous resources. You meet like-minded people who are in the same kind of situation as you are, and they could be a tremendous network. Connect with Somali student associations, right? Connect with Somali community, volunteer, build your network. And this is how you're gonna find a lot of non-traditional resources to help you go through your schooling in Canada. Again, we have shared a whole bunch of resources here as well. One thing that I would also pay a little bit of attention to is now Canadian banking institutions, they provide very specific banking needs for international students. There are two of which we have mentioned over here. One is from Bank of Nova Scotia or Scotiabank, and the other one is from TD Bank. Please go and check out what kind of options that are available for you. In some cases, you can actually build these banking relationships before you even show up in Canada, right? So make sure that you do check it, because it's going to also help to acquire work and study permits as well. In some cases, especially when loans and stuff are involved, you might also need a Canadian guarantor. But again, there are many different resources that have to come together and be pooled together for you to be able to fund your schooling in Canada. And I think we're open for questions. Over to you, Salman.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Anis. This was extremely informational. Of course, a lot to absorb for students here, especially on the finances. But I think this is especially the last slide on resources is very, very helpful. Just a quick reminder to people that this is our website, career.substack.com, which is an informational portal. We would post the link to this webinar as well as the slide deck in a few hours after the session is over. So we have received a number of questions on the YouTube comments, and I will share some of those here for you to answer. So to begin with, I think the question that we have received is, the students in Pakistan, when they are exploring international opportunities, they are looking at various countries and comparing options. So what are the fields which are considered like top high quality field within Canada, where when students comparing education in US, UK, Canada, Australia, these are the fields where the programs are really high ranked in Canada, and they should receive preference over other countries. So if you can just share some thoughts on that, Khadija.
Sure. I think it may be wiser to look at the program specifically as opposed to the country as a whole. Because again, your program is going to determine, and the program ranking internationally or globally is going to determine where the strengths lie for specific institutions. So for example, in Canada, the university I work at, the University of Alberta, we are one of the top ranked for artificial intelligence and for petroleum and mining engineering, because we are, an energy producer in Alberta. But I mean, we still offer 200 different programs. For example, if you're looking to do maybe a bachelor's degree in psychology, this is a program that's available in the arts, in the sciences, and is pretty consistent across the board, no matter where you study. If you're looking for a specific business school where you're looking for to make certain connections, I mean, maybe you're looking in Ontario. Every university will have its specialties. So when you're looking at the ranking of educational institutions, I would say you should prioritize that over looking at the country as a whole. Canada as a whole has a lot of advantages in terms of international students, in terms of things like work integrated learning. We're leading the world in that. We're leading the world in terms of affordability, as opposed to, reputation and the quality is quite consistent. So I would say when you're looking at Canada versus Australia or versus UK or versus the US, look at the city, look at the institution, and look at the specific program. If you want to do an accounting degree, what universities have a top ranking accounting program? But also, when we're looking at international rankings, don't pay attention to rankings as much as to what the specific university or college is going to offer and whether that aligns with what your personal goals are.
Excellent. And I think a sort of related question on this in terms of scope of certain fields. So of course, when students are coming to Canada, they are planning beyond studies sometimes in terms of work permit or sort of getting some work experience. So what about some scope of different fields that are there in Canada so that students also keep that in mind when selecting certain subjects?
Sure, absolutely. So Canada is, a resource-based economy, but we have quite a well-established service sector and financial sector. So when you're looking at job opportunities, they vary across the board, but some skills that are really well suited to, being able to, that are transferable to different professional fields, definitely would be, data management, analytics, anything in business, accounting, finance, computer science is an emerging field. Anything in health services, so medical laboratory science, nursing, allied health professionals. The service sector is also huge. The natural resource and energy management sector is huge. But, lots of different transferable skills that are, again, you may not realize. People talk about what's the value of doing a humanities degree or an arts or a social sciences degree, but a lot of soft skills and transferable business administrative skills that you can apply to different civil service jobs, for example, you can learn in a humanities or social science degree. So really, I would say, the scope varies. But when you're looking at, job opportunities and professional, viability post-graduation, I would say definitely the financial sector, the resource sector, as well as the service sector. I don't know, Anis, if you want to comment a little bit more on that from an EPB perspective.
No, we live in a global world now, right? We're not. I would say, bounded by geographical boundaries, and I think people have started to realize that all over the world. So, in that sense, even let's say you are in Canada and you're acquiring your education in Canada, your skill can go after that anywhere in the world. So the whole world is open for you. You're not just bounded by Canada in that sense. And obviously, when Imam said education is your passport, that's so true, right? Your education, especially a good quality education, will take you anywhere in the world. So you're not bounded by that. Having said that, Canada does have some leadership in certain areas that Khatija has mentioned. But at the same time, some of these non-traditional fields that are coming out that have been there in social sciences and stuff, Canada does lead in some of those areas as well. I would say it's the culture in Canada that makes it very, very different compared to United States and UK. Culture within the cities, the whole multiculturalism and diversity aspect of things makes a big difference. I also have seen is that the quality of life in Canada is very, very consistent across the country. Which may not be the case in some of the other countries as well. And those are some of the things that make tremendous amount of experiences, because no matter where you're going to go and get your education in Canada, you will have very much equal opportunity to make it, right? So you don't have to be basically an Oxford graduate or a Cambridge graduate or Harvard graduate. Even if you're coming from Dalhousie or Mount Royal University, you still have a very, very good opportunity to get into a really good graduate program in Canada and succeed from there onwards, right? So I think those are some of the other considerations as well that you wanna think about. And at the same time, I think there is a very well-established Somali community that provides a lot of support to anyone coming to that country as well, and it's a great resource to be in and be part of the community.
Excellent, Anis. The numbers you showed in terms of conversion from the Canadian dollars to Pakistani actually also shocked me in many ways. So I was reflecting, and this is more of a question from the education board side. The cost of the most expensive undergraduate education in Pakistan is close to about one-sixth of what the numbers you showed, which means that planning for finances, applying for scholarships, all of this is challenging. In your experience, is it possible for students to go up to 80% scholarship or 100% scholarship and like pay nothing from the pocket, or there's some amount of fund, even if despite all the scholarships that they are given, there's still some minimum percentage or amount that they still need to arrange for personally before even start planning for scholarships?
Yeah, I think from a finance perspective, you have to look at this whole picture from all the different resources that you can come and you can pull together, right? So you don't want to look at it just from a one single angle of tuition and scholarship. You may be covered for a scholarship, let's say 30%, 40%, 50%, in some cases even 100%. But your tuition is one thing. What about your living expenses? What about your cost of books and supplies and stuff? That can still add up very, very significantly. The second thing
I would say as a recruiter, as an international recruiter,
exactly,
working for a top 5 Canadian university, international scholarships at the undergraduate level are very rarely full scholarships. So
exactly,
as Ani said, they will cover maybe 50% of your tuition in your first year. Some might be renewable. And again, those academic awards are incentive-based. And then the application-based awards for leadership, community service, or based on financial need are quite a bit more competitive and quite a bit rare. You don't find as many full rides. So when you're thinking about scholarships as a mean to cover your expenses, I would say, anticipate only 20, 30% of your tuition funding to be made up from scholarships.
absolutely.
As well, when you're applying for a Canadian visa study permit, you will need to demonstrate financial capacity to cover your academic and living costs, at least for your first year of your undergraduate. And that's going to be a determining factor on whether or not you will be successful in obtaining the visa and study permit. So I would definitely say, Salman, that, don't at the undergraduate level, do not anticipate that scholarships in Canada will cover up to that much. I would say 30, 40% is realistic. At the graduate level, obviously postgraduate level, there's more research and thesis-based funding, bench funding, but again, it's a totally different model.
Yeah, undergrad will differ very, very tremendously from the graduate level. And again, you have to do your research, right? So you have to know and understand what kind of bursaries are available, what kind of financial aid is available, the city that you're going into, whether you're going to end up doing some part-time work or not, though. As an international student, especially at the undergrad level, you do have a work permit to work 20 hours a week, if I'm not mistaken, Khadija, right?
Yes. So as an international student on a study permit, if you're in a full-time course load, which is a minimum of 3 courses, you are actually entitled to work on or off campus up to 20 hours a week while you're in school and full-time while you're in breaks. And there's a huge work culture of part-time work for students. I had many part-time jobs as a Canadian student. I mean, I even had a partial scholarship, but I worked part-time at a real estate agency answering phones on weekends. I worked part-time for the libraries. One of my jobs was with the U of A Students Union. I was a community relations coordinator. I worked at a restaurant. I worked in a grocery store. There were lots. And then for the summer, I would have a full-time, work position as an intern in a government office. So, I mean, there's a range of different opportunities, but international students can definitely find relevant experience and can work part-time, but we don't want you to also be focused on working. The focus of your reason for being in Canada or for studying abroad is your studies. So that needs to be where, that's why I don't encourage students to get a job in their first semester or in their first year when they arrive. You need to acclimatize yourself to the rigors, the academic rigors. It's not a walk in the park, so that should be secondary. So again, having that financial safety or having that financial capacity so that you're not worried about, emergencies is important to have in place before you think about, scholarship funding and work experience.
Yeah, I think from that perspective, you want to come at least minimum prepared for the first year, thinking that, you will not have any work, you will not have any other sources of funding available, and your first year is covered both from a tuition perspective as well as from a living expenses perspective. And again, think of it, it's very likely that tuition is going to go up the next year because it's very likely that it's connected, it's indexed to inflation. So it's going to go up. So you start preparing for that before you even get there, right? So these things will change as your year go by and you get to know and understand. And at the same time, the minimum wage also differs from province to province. So where you're going to end up actually doing the work and how much money you will be able to make also going to make a big difference. So if you do plan to work, you have to basically start to look into those factors as well. And again, you're not guaranteed to find work even if you have a work permit. So it doesn't mean that you will find work and stuff. And we have seen students, especially international students, struggle to find work in some cases because let's say the economy wasn't doing that great. You are going through pandemic and stuff. Then what? Right? Everybody's basically sitting at home kind of thing, right? So you have to factor a lot of these things into your planning and prep work. So again, plan, prepare, think of emergencies, think of all of these things that are not visible, like what could be the blind spots, and make sure when you're coming to Canada, you have basically contingencies in place that you can address all of these as they come to you. Because just God forbid any kind of emergency happens and you are now in some sort of health crisis or something, then what? And who's covering it and how it will be covered and stuff like that. Things, a lot of different things to think about and plan for.
We are very fortunate, though, to be a part of the worldwide global Ismaili Jamaat, one Jamaat, one heart. So this is something that definitely, I think it gives international students, Ismaili students, an advantage because there's so much more support available just through the community, on campus, through the Jamaat, in terms of economic planning, in terms of education planning. So this is something that, we're very fortunate to be able to have, and that, as Anis said, we should take advantage of all of those resources and those options. I think that's one of the reasons why we were motivated to create the International Student Handbook, the guidebook, to make sure that international students who want to come to Canada have an international student guide and have, a resource that's guiding them appropriately.
These are some excellent points that you made about planning for their undergraduate studies. It's a 4-year commitment, so students really have to plan very, very well. I just want to be cognizant of time, so maybe last 2 questions I'll share quickly. So one question is, how many years of education experience you need in Canada to be eligible for a work permit?
So normally, if you are graduating from a 4-year degree program or even a 2-year or 3-year associate degree or diploma program, within 90 days of your convocation, you can apply during that period for a postgraduate work permit. Now, the postgraduate work permit will be assessed based on the type of, you have to have some type of employment offer in place. It makes a difference whether or not it's relevant to your field of study. And again, the type of degree or diploma you're doing will determine how many years. So you may be eligible for 1 year. If you're doing a degree, you may get 2 or 3 years. And so during that time, while you have a postgraduate work permit, you are legally entitled to work full-time in Canada. And during that time, then you can apply, for example, for permanent residency if you wish to. Your time spent in school, in your academic studies, also counts towards time in Canada. So that would also count favorably towards your permanent residence application if that's what you're thinking about. But normally, as a Canadian student, while you're in school, your study permit in your passport will list the conditions of your work terms while you're a student, and then you would prepare to apply for that postgraduate work permit to have it in place by the time you graduate so that you can start that 3-year period. And then again, if you choose to apply for permanent residency at that time, you can. If you wish to return, you have 3 years of high quality, relevant Canadian experience.
Yeah, I think one thing I would add is that look at the co-op program, right? That the work integrated learning, that's the key. And in some cases, especially when you're looking into some very technical kind of programs like engineering and stuff, you not only get a Canadian work experience while you're in school, but you are literally connecting with the potential employer who's going to hire you right after your graduation. Right?
More often than not, those employers will hire their students right after you graduate. Or, you might find a network. And sometimes you can make up to $2,500, 3,000 Canadian dollars a month in salary. So it's about maximizing those connections. And oftentimes those connections are available right on campus for you.
Yeah, absolutely. I think co-op program is one reason why Canada has now become a favorite destination for many, many students from Pakistan. One last quick question on the transfer of credits. So one question is that if somebody has started undergraduate education, either in Pakistan, and some people start from Middle East or Far East, many Pakistani students also go there. And if they want to transfer credits to Canadian university after first year or second year, is it acceptable, or is it a very tedious process and the credits are not accepted easily?
I can speak to that. Any student, for example, that is an undergraduate student that's looking to transfer into another bachelor's program would be considered a post-secondary transfer applicant. So they're assessed differently if you're applying directly from high school with no post-secondary courses, or if you have maybe a diploma or a certificate or a degree and you want to continue in a bachelor's program. So any student who's finished high school and also completed coursework at the post-secondary level will be considered a transfer applicant. Transfer admission is more competitive usually than direct entry from high school, and it depends on the space within each faculty or within each program. Normally, you'll be assessed on your high school marks as well as your post-secondary coursework completed. And most universities will only transfer up to 60 credits, or they'll look at the last 60 credits of coursework you finished, so the last 2 years equivalent of coursework that you have completed. So normally your transfer credit is evaluated after you've received admission to that program. And normally, in order to receive a degree from that institution, you need to complete at least half of your credits at that institution. So those are some of the things to keep in mind if you're wanting to transfer. Say if you started in Malaysia or started in the Far East or started somewhere else. It has to, again, be an institution of the same caliber or quality where the universities will recognize those courses and will be able to offer you equivalent transfer credits. So it is a little bit more competitive. It is a little bit more, it's not as straightforward. It's a little bit more of a difficult pathway. And again, the most important thing is to connect with that specific university. Say, I have 2 years of credits in a computing science and technology diploma from a university in Pakistan. Are my credits transferable? What are your requirements? What do I need in terms of making up credits? Do you offer a bridging or an open studies program? Those are some things to think about if you want to transfer credits at the undergraduate level.
Yeah, and one thing I would also add is that it not only applies to schools in Middle East and stuff like that. A lot of students, they actually come to a college in Canada rather than going to a university directly. And there are also issue of transferring of credits from the college to university if they choose to do so. So a lot of time students do it that they come and spend the first 2 years at a college because the cost is a little bit cheaper. And then they will transfer the credits to university. So again, do your research as Khatija is saying, like what are the credits that are basically transferable to at the university level so that you're not wasting your time and money at any kind of institution.
Excellent. Khadija and Anis, maybe, so probably you understand that in the context in Pakistan, a decision such as big as this is made by both the student and the parents together, because parents have to foot the bill in most cases. And I'm sure there are many parents who are watching this wonderful webinars. Any last piece of advice you want to give them as a family, as they are sort of looking at the various options about, so one final advice they want to give them, the parents and the students, as they prepare for an education in Canada?
Sure, I would say the most important thing to do is effectively communicate with each other, and again, create an effective full picture of what your basic limitations as well as your goals are as a family. So again, this is an investment into your future. So you have to think about what are the minimum tuition costs? What are the living expenses? What is the scope of employability for this career? But also think about, as a student, or as what your child wants in terms of what they want to get out of their life. Students who are pushed into a career or a field that they may not have any type of passion or any type of connection to will not be as successful and will not be as actualized or as fulfilled as students who are actually living their passion or connecting their personal skills and strengths to a professional or academic program. So I would say, as a family, make sure that you are on the same page as to what the expectations are parentally, as well as what the desires and the goals are for the student, and make sure that all of those are clearly on the table. And then you can look at institutions that will fit that according to what, as a family, your complete picture looks like. So communication is the key, as well as making sure that all of the information that you have, or all of the factors that you have, are clearly understood by parents as well as by prospective students.
So I would speak a little bit more from a finance perspective, because Khadija did speak a little bit more from a qualitative perspective. Plan early. So, I mean, if you want to send your kids to school in Canada, you know very clearly, because all that information is available at university websites and stuff, like what that cost is going to be, what the tuition cost is very likely going to be, what the living expenses are very likely going to be. You need to start preparing for that 3, 4, 5 years before you even try to get there. You have to start saving a little bit early. You also have to make sure that when you're saving, your money is not exposed to risk, right? So that by the time you're coming to pay for it, everything is basically gone. Money exchange in between Canada and Pakistani rupees is also a bit of a fluctuating factor. And I also know it because I went through it personally, right? When I was actually going to school in Hong Kong, we had to actually submit a little bit of amount, and Pakistan had just done nuclear explosion at that time, and the exchange rate went from 50 Pakistani rupees to a US dollar to like 150, like overnight, and the cost increased like 3 times overnight. And these are the factors that you don't have control over. So what you have control over, make sure that you do that well, right? And you plan that over the time period. Also remember that if you're gonna basically borrow the money, by the time you're going to graduate out, you're going to be in debt somewhere between like 120 to 150,000 Canadian dollar. And then very likely you're going to find work, but because you're undergraduate and your initial job will be probably in the range of like 50, 60, 70,000, $80,000 on the top end kind of thing. Hopefully 100, 120,000, depending on your program. And now you're going to start paying that back. So what is your payback time period? Understand that a little bit, because it's a grind when you're paying that back and you're not keeping that money, and it does come and impact your quality of life as well. So understand all of those factors, that when you are going into an endeavor like that, it's not something like 4 years and out. It's probably like 4 or 5 years before that, and probably good 10 years after that. It's a good 15 years kind of time period that you're basically doing this over, right? So just like thinking about that and try to put it from that perspective. And again, it's so important that the families come together, communicate, and understand who's going to bear the cost, when that cost is going to be borne out, and at the same time, what kind of risks that come in. Because tomorrow, let's say the child is here in Canada and they need $10,000, and now the parents can afford it, and now the kid is stuck here, stressed financially, mentally, and now you're going into very different kind of problems, right? So think from a little bit from that perspective, and really work together. And that's why, as Khatija said, that make sure like all the stakeholders are involved, because I know when these endeavors happen, the whole family comes together. It's not just like, one child or parent. It's like brothers, sisters, grandparents, everybody comes together to make sure that this thing will happen. But eventually it comes back and impacts everyone. So everybody understands what the impacts are, prepare for it. And again, one thing that I would again and again say, that prepare for emergency, budget for emergencies. Because a lot of time we have like the basics covered, but we don't have our emergencies covered. And when that happens, the risk just goes out of the blue, right? Like out of whack kind of thing. And to make sure that you have a little bit of a buffer room.
Excellent. Thank you, Khadija and Anis. This brings us to the conclusion of the first webinar. Again, a quick reminder, this is going to be a series of 3 webinars on education opportunities in Canada. We covered the undergraduate landscape and the opportunities in this webinar. Next Saturday at 8 p.m. Pakistan time, we will speak about graduate education in Canada and various funding opportunities. Khadija and Anis, I can't thank you enough for sharing your time and knowledge with the Jamaat and the students in Pakistan on this Saturday morning, your time. And again, grateful for your time and knowledge, and we look forward to future collaborations. Thank you, everyone, for being with us.
Thank you so much for having us. We really appreciate it, and we hope that this was useful for you and gave you some important information on your future search for studying abroad in Canada. And hopefully, inshallah, we'll see you on this side of the ocean in the future. And so we wish you all well, and thank you very much for hosting us.
Thank you so much, and Viability to everyone in Pakistan.
Thank you.